Good morning. I'm trying to relax because uh I don't do the live streams that well and engage and interact with those that come to see. But I have some interesting ideas that I was just going to
The live
share
streams
for
that
this.
well and
Oh,
engage
hang
and
on.
interact with.
Did that to myself. Anyway, I've been working on a project and actually working on it, not just talking about it, about a story that I wanted to write. Um, I've told so many stories of things that have happened to me in hopes that it would at least plant the seed that the spiritual warfare is real and that thing just stuff most of the people that come here know what I'm talking about. But I, I see so much division, and I understand everyone sees the world differently, but the hype my hyper focus is on these events or the warfare that I've seen that I didn't really know that we were born into. Good morning, D-Bird. And whether it's a flat plane or uh, other all the different topics that we go over, I kind of see people still hyper focused on that, and maybe that's their calling. But I just always had this sense of nervousness about what the things that I've seen in my life could be happening around them. Right. That's what I've always went over. And and so I told all these stories thinking that maybe it would unveil uh, that truth to everyone else. Even knowing that God's the one that gives people the eyes to see, not some story. Good morning, truth. And so I set out at first to write this story or these different sets of stories. Um, I won't call it fiction. I say anti-fiction. It's double negative, right? Because technically I'm building the character, but I kind of see the world this way. Maybe not exactly. I don't think that we're walking and talking with the fallen angels that are written of in Enoch. But the message in the story is that there's that spiritual warfare going on to hold every thought captive, because some of these characters that plant the seed for people to behave a certain way is sort of that thought process that we come up with, that, oh, that's a good idea, and then we just get smacked in the head because we weren't praying about it, we weren't listening to what God had to say to us. And so it's not even really a massive undertaking. To me, I'm excited about it. I have a friend that I talk with regularly, and and they get really excited when they read the scripture, and I mean I do as well to a certain extent, but I mean they really, it's like they come alive when they read it. You can see that. Um, and as I began to try and visualize the things that I was reading in these stories that were written so long ago. Um, yeah, I was talking about you. Uh, good morning. Um, it As I began to visualize the current events of these stories that happened so long ago. And if there's nothing new under the sun, an element of this could be totally possible. I don't see why it could. I began to react the same way, and um, that excitement it breathed life into what I was reading and then back into me. And so anyway, it's coming together nicely. I find the synchronicity of the things that actually exist in the world today, around me, that are literally 1 hour's drive away. I was like, wow, I just never, um, I wow, it's amazing. For instance, there's a Mount Herman, Louisiana. There's not much there, but it's not that far from. And I'm like, and so as I'm trying to build these characters and where they all meet up and how it's revealed to this character who is he's not Enoch, but he walks through some of the same elements um of what Enoch talked about. Uh, except these entities just look like people. He doesn't know. He starts off in a world where he's got friends and he's walking through life. He's not saved. So again, it's not Enoch. Or he's not living a Christian lifestyle at first. But as things begin to unravel in his life, and he realizes that um, some of these friends don't have his best interest in mind, and there's actually an agenda for his life. And he finds out at like some county fair, parish fair in Mount Hermon. He didn't expect them all to be there. But as I was writing all this out, I realized I was still hyper focused on the negative. On the, I mean, there's a lot of them, right? And I've figured out a great way to. These are just the leaders. That's not even all of the entities mentioned. There's 19 listed, and then there would be Azazel would make the 20th, Chiefs of Tens, 200. And I'm not making a character out of every 200, but you see the point. There's still a lot of people. But I was so hyper focused on them and how to build the characters and how they would interact with these people and plant the seeds for their destruction to lead them astray. And the thing that I'd come up with, as I mentioned in a live stream that I took down, was that he's walking with one of them, and he sees this elderly man at a gazebo, and he's got this cube, and it's a game of sorts. And one of the other guy gets really irritated, and he doesn't want to be around him, and he leaves. But I thought that there was something missing. I'm just walking you through the way that I built this. I don't even know if I built it, but it just came together amazingly. And there was something missing. He was going to have these interactions with this elderly man, and he never really explains what the game is, but you can see it. It's a representative of life. I know life is not a game, but the elderly man is messing with it, and I started to think about what that represents. Where did that even come from? Why did I think that up? This six-sided cube. Well, the bottom doesn't have a playing field, but it's four sides and a top. And as I started to look up cube chess, there was only one picture, and it was of the one side, the other side, and the top. And I noticed how you could only focus on one plane. You could only move one piece. That was the idea in the game at any given time. But once you got to the corner, you could kind of see what was going on the other side. And the more I thought about that concept, and I don't know how the game works yet. I'm still working on that. But the concept of focusing on one plane, that hyper focus, that doesn't matter if it's ingredients in a magic syrup or what the president is saying. If we're focusing on one plane, we fail to make a move anywhere else. And it's still a narrative given to us. It's still a seed being planted, and I got to find the details out of this. What does this mean? What are they doing? And it's it, and it just it seemed to reign more true to me than I realized when I was trying to build this allegory for life. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring you. I'm doing the same thing again, where I'm stuck in my mind. How are you all doing this morning? But anyway, I realized, because I was hyper focused on these negative characters, these fallen entities, and then the main character goes in. He has a small interaction with this nice elderly man who I've based off a character that I've seen in Hollywood productions. But God has been represented by Hollywood. He's been written into scripts in a certain way. There was a movie called Mother. I forget the gentleman's name. I think Jennifer Lawrence is the Lucifer character. but he's an artist in it, and he doesn't really care what goes on. He's kind of checked out. He's just always worried about creating and stuff, and doesn't really seem to care about his, what's going on. But again, it's by Hollywood. And so the point that I'm trying to make is it's still their narrative. Um, Anthony Hopkins in Westworld played he's the creator of the park. And you can clearly see, I don't suggest you go watch it. There's a ton of violence and nudity in it. But he's the creator of the park, and um, he says the right words to these machines basically that look like people. And but it's written by Hollywood, and so they're still controlling the narrative. And it when I realized that and thought about the concept of that, I I realized the importance of creating my own narrative, my to really represent the Father and his love and his gentleness and how he interacts with people. And when I started thinking about that, and I realized that there was something missing in the interaction of this young man and him at the park, and then he goes back and things start to turn, I got to uh, Enoch 20. Getting kind of close down. So in Enoch 20, it lists the seven archangels, um, and the things that I believe it's 20 or 22. Give me a second. Should have had it open. So mouthful. Enoch 20. These are the angels of the armies. This. I'm not sure if this is this man Aaron Miller translated or retranslated. So some of them are a little different, but he keyed it to the Strong's Concordance, and that's why I bought it, because I wanted to be able to look up the words. But these are the angels of the armies. Uriel, one of the holy angels, who is over the world and Tartarus. Raphael, one of the holy angels, who is over the spirits of men. Raguel, one of the holy angels who takes vengeance in the world of the lights. That's interesting. Michael, one of the holy angels over the people appointed for good things and over the chaos. Sariel, one of the holy angels over the spirits who sin by the Spirit. Gabriel, one of the holy angels who presides over paradise and over the dragons. It says serpents in the Rich Charles version, and the cherubim. And Ramiel, one of the holy angels who is appointed by God over those who rise. These are the names of the seven archangels. And it's got a list of stuff that it really describes in detail at the bottom. Ramiel may actually be the one who blows the trumpet when the dead rise first. And so as I was reading through that, I was thinking, instead of him just meeting God alone, there's an elderly man there, and he's surrounded by some other younger men that are around his age. Maybe not all of them, but Michael being there for those who are appointed for great things, or I don't have the R.H. Charles version in front of me. It says something a little different, but the characteristic of what some of these archangels would be, and I'm very careful and humble about that, because you could really get into dangerous territory depending on how you make the story. It's to honor God. It's not to and to give them respect, no doubt, but not to make it such a story where people start worshiping angels. Like that's what fallen ones want to do. But there are other characters in the story that don't. Some of them don't make it. Some of them they pass away, and some of them go through a lot of trauma and uh, find salvation after some of this trauma. And I realized in that, when I was trying to fit all this together, Some of these angels that you meet, I mean, they look like people. They're standing there, they're playing the game and just kind of messing with it, having very relaxed, very confident, and just peaceful, very peaceful. But they they have interactions with some of these other characters. I realized I have to write this book similar to um, like you know how like Lord of the Rings has like a million characters in it, or what's another one? Game of Thrones, or Westworld's got a million characters in it. And so the point, it's it's a it's a massive story that you don't have every character present at the same time. So it goes off into, what's this guy's story about? What's this young lady doing over here? And realizing that whenever the ones that are led astray, that the good guys are there, and they're planting the seed there, um, to say, hey, come back. Maybe you want to do this, but there is the element of free will, and some of them move on, and they kind of get their butt kicked because they've rejected um, they've rejected that path that God had set out for them. They're trying to step out of what God has designed for them for good. And I get that these are archangels. This is just an example. They're not the messenger angels, or the watchers, but it I'm trying to create something that plants the seed that you really are fearfully and wonderfully made. And our Father takes a personal interest in your life, and so do some of his heavenly beings. And I think it's an amazing concept, and I'm just really excited about creating it. But the thing that I really wanted to focus on was that concept of the looking at one plane, looking at, again, back to this game. It's a cube, five sides, and the top, but you can only move one piece at a time, meaning your focus can only be on one side at a time. And it's only till you get towards the edge of it that you can even begin to see. There was some concept art. I was gonna ask my buddy to come on, but I didn't want to overwhelm him, because I just kind of spur of the moment. But there's a concept art. If you Google cube chess, and again, it's just someone's trying to sell it, but you can see the three sides of it, and it represents it perfectly. How it's only once you get to the edge you can kind of see what's going on over here and what's going on over here, and that there's other elements to life in this representation, and it represents so much more than that, because as long as we are focused on the world, they will constantly give us the script. Politics, that's going to be, well, I don't have to tell you all that, but there's some of these fallen entities represent politics. Some of them represent the medical field, such as abortion, things like that. Some of them are into like new age hippy dippy stuff. They're always there feeding you, or casting out seeds to lead you astray. And so when I looked at this game, however it's going to come together, it will. But I realized there's, outside of what God's design is, they're always going to throw you a script to think off of. And, you know, all it is a distraction. Our focus is what they're trying to hold captive, so that they can throw the other thoughts in there. And if you're not even focusing on holding every thought captive, because they're guiding your focus somewhere else, then it just comes back again. You know what I mean? And the seed stays there, and it grows, and you get led astray. And so I don't think that I thought that the game concept, I don't even understand it yet, how I'm going to build it, but I'm like, this is this is real in a sense, and it's a great representation of the battle that's going on, the battle for the mind. You know. So yeah. Anyway, good morning, everyone. I'm still doing the same thing. I told myself on the start of this morning, I was going to pay more attention to the chat and engage the crowd. My brain does not work like that. I cannot explain things and read at the same time. A lot of our brethren do it like perfectly, but I can't do it. Like you, Mike. Like you. Good morning. But anyway, that's all I have. Hang on. I'm gonna read you. I'm just so I don't want to read you all I have because one, it's a rough draft. But I want to know if I hid this character well enough. So give me a second. It starts off with a dream. And this is a very short piece. This I'll give you some hints. So and one, it sounds a little dark at first. It makes more sense when the guy comes back in later. Because this main character will be started thinking about Paradise Lost and what was that other one? There's Paradise Lost, and then I forget the name of it. There's another guy wrote it later. But the idea there were these writers of old that are celebrated, and all they did was they took a tour of hell, and it was political. Again, I don't know if they had an agenda to plant seeds of like evil, but it's the focus is on hell and walking through it. And so I was like, well, if I'm trying to glorify the Father, and this book right here describes how Enoch got to take a tour of the heavens, then why can't Dante's Inferno? Thank you, Brent. Why can't my character take a similar one with these angels that have taken an interest in his life? And so that's much later in the story, but to describe that, to plant the seeds of hope and love, and I believe it mentions the Garden of Mercy. What does that look like? What does it smell like? You know, what's going on there? My friend Photo Helix, we were talking years ago, and he sent me a link to something, and I'm sure he sent it to some of you as well. But it's called Placebo, and that's the link right there. There's a man who was a police officer in New Orleans, and he died on the operating table, and what he described sounds a lot like what Enoch described, and I don't know if the man had ever read it, but the way that he walked through and he was seeing these things, these demons that were cast out, it seems to line up pretty well, and how they're deformed, and basically the ones that what their sin was, they all kind of huddle around each other. It's an interesting story, but again, it focuses on the outer parts, the abyss, basically. And so that's interesting if you want to check that out later. But so in later on in the story, this fella gets to walk through and see some of these, some of these different areas. And so it starts out with a dream that doesn't make any sense to him. Now, I'm just asking you, this character, I'm pretty sure that he is not in the book of Enoch. I know for a fact that he is in the Bible. And he'll be having a dialogue with some of these angels later. But I just want to know if I hit him well enough. If you guess what he is, tell me why. Just tell me why you picked that. So anyway, it starts off. Hang on, let me get a breath. It starts off. Am I dead? Corey asked. No, a gentle voice said pitifully. Well, am I dreaming? Corey asked again, noticing just how much fear he recognized in his own voice. The voice, whoever it was, wherever it was, must have recognized it as well. The voice's pitch elevated and turned into a slight chuckle. No. Corey, now rather frustrated, not so much at the voice, but his lack of understanding, exclaimed, Then how is this possible? A slight tone of irritation in his voice. Oh, can't find my scroll bar. Sorry. Then how is this possible? A slight tone of irritation in his voice. I can see the whole earth from here. And the stars, where are the stars? The light of the earth reflecting off of his face and clothes, Corey seemed to be standing on a hard surface, but nothing was under his feet. Surrounded by nothing in a vast black abyss. The only thing he could see was the entire earth underneath him and slightly to his front. You will see them at their appointed time, the voice said calmly. Within a split second, Corey noticed how he seemed to be able to feel the voice's intention, like it was trying to put his worries to rest and ease his anxiety and agitation at his own ignorance. Nevertheless, he pressed on. And you? Who are you? Where are you? He said in a much softer and respectful tone. I can hear you as if you're standing right in front of me, but I can't see anyone else. I can't see anything else besides myself and the earth. Corey said, concern still in his voice. All in due time, my man, all in due time, the voice said confidently. He didn't feel like he was moving at all, but Corey noticed the earth began to move away, shrinking smaller underneath him, slowly at first, and then at an ever-increasing pace as it descended and moved further away. What's happening? He asked. We have company, the voice said. Come and see. Corey shifted his view from the earth to an object in the distance. Though it did not seem to be walking or moving at all, it was coming right toward him. I feel like it's looking at me, Corey said, his anxiety ever increasing. At first he couldn't tell what it was, but as it drew closer, it took the shape of a man with something jagged on his head. It appeared to be carrying something on his back, but it was either too dark to be able to tell, or light didn't reflect off of whatever this being was the way it did Corey. There wasn't a source of light in sight, of course, but Corey noticed when he looked down with his palms turned up to examine his body, he could clearly see his hands, the navy blue light sports jacket, his blue jeans, and running shoes. Whatever this thing was, it was hard to make out, and it was getting closer. It stood perfectly still, but Corey knew that it was alive and moving towards him. Is that you? Corey asked the voice. No, the voice answered, but you need fear not. As the dark being drew closer, Corey noticed the being had no pigment of flesh at all. The only thing that made it visible was that it was blacker than the abyss that surrounded it. As it finally got close enough for Corey to make out the slightest amount of detail, he could see it definitely had the muscle structure and head of a man, but its neck and shoulder muscles seemed so large that it was disfigured. It was carrying nothing on its back at all. My God, what's wrong with its neck? Corey thought to himself. Certain parts of the being began to shimmer, a hint of red and gold as it got closer, as if light was bouncing off of its skin, yet the being remained blacker than the space that surrounded it. As it got closer, the being became more defined to Corey's view. On his head protruded 5 pointed spikes, the center being the largest. It looked exactly the way a crown would look, except it seemed to be attached to the being's head. Whatever this thing was on its head, even though it was a part of it, Corey sensed that it was extremely heavy. And yet the being's head, body, and corona seemed to be of a regular proportion. The parts Corey at first noticed, its immensely overly muscular neck and shoulders, seemed to be carrying the burden of whatever that was protruding from the being's head. Corey didn't know how he was sure of this, but he knew that it was the reason for the muscular abnormality in the being's neck and shoulders. As it drew closer, Corey could see the mass of other muscles on the being. By all accounts of the world, this thing was in tip-top shape. Besides its neck and shoulder area, it had the form that athletes and bodybuilders aspire to achieve. The red and gold shimmer that defined its muscle structure drew sharper in detail. It, in fact, was the only way Corey could make anything out on this thing other than a silhouette. As the shimmering bits came into detail, Corey thought how they looked exactly like the scales of a snake. It was over its entire body, including the corona, and it glistened at different intervals depending on how the light hit the scales. When Corey could finally make out its eyes, he noticed how horribly red they were. No iris or pupil, just red. It reminded him of the way blood looks after it coagulates and dies. And it was looking directly at him. By now, it couldn't have been but a few yards from him, though with no reference point, there was no way to tell. Closer and closer it drew as Corey's heart began to race. What a terrible thing to see. And to feel the gaze of a predator looking at something helpless. There was some sort of inscription just above its forehead centered on the corona. Squiggly lines that Corey couldn't make out. It was either too ineligible or in a different language. Never mind that, he thought to himself. This thing is right on top of us. With a dramatic inhale and a snarling exhale, it opened its mouth and exposed a perfectly set of sharp, jagged yellow teeth. The deepest voice Corey had ever heard, void of anything good. It smiled and spoke. I smell bacon. Inhaling exhaustively, Corey opened his eyes to see the familiarity of his room. Anyway, I'm gonna stop right there. So I know that sounds like it's dark, but that character comes in later, and it makes more sense. But I'm just curious. Nobody took a guess. Oh, I guess I didn't tell you because he is talking to another voice there, who's also revealed. Any guesses as to what that guy is? I just want to know if I hit him right. Wait on the delay. Thank you, D-Bird. Is it frozen up? Nobody? That's all right. Well, I guess no guess is as good as nobody being able to get the right one. Um, so the concept is well, it's just that there are things going on in the heavens um, that surpass any one story. That surpass we. I'm just giving that little nugget. I know that it seems dark because there's no end to it, right? I didn't describe who the voice was that he was talking to because he could. I mean, you'll find that out later. But I focused more on this dark being, right? And so at first it seems a little gloomy, but it uh it takes a quick turn much later, and the idea there is that this other character, this dark being, who's in different books that are in the canon, um, is interacting with. Yeah, it's kind of close to that Pagano, but he's more pronounced in the Bible. I'll just say that, and I don't. I mean, I built the character. That's kind of the freedom that I took with it. I'm not. It doesn't really describe the way that he looks in the Bible, but just that he gets in the way. But in this story, he just has a dialogue with some of the angels because they're all together, showing Corey around that section. Uh, so anyway, I don't know. I'm excited about it. If you have any pointers, feel free to leave a comment. Because I am struggling with where's it at? It's in Enoch 8. Some of the guys described there um, let's see, when it describes the ones that what they teach, it's pretty straightforward until you get to where am I at? Hang on. It's pretty straightforward until you get to the guys that are the fallen angels, that teach men the signs of the earth and the signs of the sun and the signs of the moon, or the goings of the moon. And I understand I could like totally just build this as like a whole like flat earth book, but I want the the those that, if you notice the way I wrote his dream, I didn't say what shape the earth was. And there's also the concept of the demon says he smells bacon. Corey wakes up and he does in fact smell bacon. So it's kind of, I eat Levitically, and I'm not throwing that on. The point that I'm making is I don't eat bacon, but I didn't write it as if to say woe to you if you do. There's just that concept in there that there's one of these fallen entities is trying to get him to eat something that in the Old Testament says is unclean. Um, and so the point that I'm making with that is the way that you have to write things like that to not make the reader, if they don't believe exactly the way that you do, to not make them go, well, fine, he said, it just points out that this fallen entity is trying to give him something that in the Old Testament says it's unclean. He says he can see the whole earth. He never said round or flat. It's open to the interpretation of the reader, and that is important for those that may not believe the same way that you do, but can still get the truth of what I'm trying to plant in the grace of God and how much interest that He takes in our lives, and his messenger angels and his even some of his archangels. Um, if it says be careful who you entertain, or that you may be entertaining angels unaware. I think about that so much. I think about it so much. They had some contractors come into my job, and they were working on some of the chargers, and they were kind of off. I didn't have much direct interaction with them, but because I was going over this and kind of in prayer and thinking about it, and it was like I forget the dialogue that I was privately having with the Father, but I looked over and I was like, oh, I get it. I mean, it's that subtle, in that you really need fear not, whatever is going on in the world, whatever the narrative is that they're trying to throw out. I don't think that heaven is that far away at any given point, and there are some mighty beings that were created by the Father that are right there, whether it's in the flesh or whether um, in the spirit. They're right there. So do you think it could be good or bad angels? Are you asking me, Alpha? It's my chat. Oh wait, hang on. I got two chats going. Yeah, I'm at the bottom. I don't know if you were talking to me or asking someone else something. I'm bad about keeping up with the chat, man. I can't flow and can't do the two things. Um. Anyway, I'm excited about it, and I just wanted to share that, to hopefully at least plant it. What I wanted to focus on, but I didn't, was the narrative. Um, and maybe my perspective of it is a little different because I'm creating my own narrative, so to speak, in this world that I'm trying to build. There's other stories I'd like to get to later, but the narrative of the world is just so and I know that dude, I got kicked out of a hospital 2 weeks ago, because I wouldn't put a mask on. After I was going to, just walking over to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist flipped out. Everyone else was cool, but he flipped out, and the level of anxiety and blood pressure. that I had. And when I went in a few days ago, to another a doctor's appointment, just the dialogue between me and the lady was nice as could be. She was like, "Hey, it's just policy," but there's still that level of stress, that that and I know that something was wrong with my blood pressure because they usually tell you what it is, and after the lady came and took it, she just wrote it down and walked off. They always tell you what it is if it's good, and she just wrote it down and walked off. And these ladies didn't mistreat me at all. They were kind and kind of went out of the way to follow their policy. But the point is that the stress is still there, that anxiety, because the world has built a narrative and many people are following it. But again, that's why I say bring it back to hold every thought captive. I know that it's still stressful when we go out in these different arenas. Um, but if the truth of God and these angels being there, if they're there the whole time, then what are we afraid of? I know I need to practice what I preach more. I was still, I don't want to say scared, but it's nerve wracking. Um, but it's because we're all tuned in to the narrative of the world, and I just wonder if we can really come to the peace that Christ said that He gives to us. If we can really zone back in on God's narrative and have that. You ever met somebody that's just like they're standing on that foundation? Their whole personality and everything about them is just like you can't move them. And it's not arrogant. It's not tough. It's just this immovable force. But they always have this peace about them. And I want to get back to that. I want to be that person and stand with other people that are. And the only way that I see how to do it is to stop focusing on the narrative of the world and to try and glorify God in everything that I do. Anyway, that's all I got. And yeah, I gotta go eat some breakfast. So thank you for all showing up. I'm sorry if I ignored you. I can't talk and read at the same time. So yeah, God bless. It was good to see you all. Have a good day. Happy Sabbath if you celebrate it on Saturday.